Click on it, you piece of garbage. So you can get on with this bullshit. Look at this. What the fuck is going on here? Alright, bruvs. We're back with The World of Keane. 32 paintings and drawings by Walter Keane. The painter who supposedly didn't paint any of his art. Maybe I should turn on the lighter. There we go. Chapter 5. What do you got, bruv? Chapter 5, Marbella and a Decision. I'm great. How are you? Those months in Paris with Colette and Renee were some of the happiest in my life. They were also some of the most productive. Colette supported my artistic efforts in every respect. She helped me to find models, the wide-eyed waifs who brought back the vision and the inspiration of war-torn Berlin. Thanks, buddy. She helped me to set up exhibitions of my work. When I became totally engrossed in my painting and forgot to eat, she brought me food and rubbed my weary shoulders. She never asked anything for herself and gave everything to our cooperative endeavor. Her encouragement and my dedication to task paid off. My paintings had begun to sell. One day, I asked Colette if she would like to visit Marbella, Spain, for a week. I thought we all needed the change in some lazy days of sunbathing. I wanted to include Renee in our plans, but Colette had another idea. I would love to get away from Paris for a week. Yes, let's go. My mother lives about an hour out of Paris and would be happy to have Renee with her for a week or two. Let's go alone. Wonderful. I'll make the arrangements. In 4 days, we were on Air France and headed for Malaga. Colette said, "Oh, Walter, it's a joy to be with you. We can really have fun and not worry about Renee." The stewardess asked, "Champagne?" "Why not?" I replied. Later, I switched to whiskey, as usual. It was a beautiful trip. Landing in Malaga, we could see the clear Mediterranean all the way to Africa. Let me put a book under here. There we go. All the way to Africa. All right, come on. A taxi took us to Marbella, where I had arranged for an apartment directly on the sea. It's the world of Keane, the artist who drew those waifs with the large eyes. This is his autobiography. The taxi took us to Marbella, where I had arranged for an apartment directly on the sea, which included a large living room with a balcony spacious enough to eat or sleep on. Only a bird or maybe a low flying pilot could see up there, and a bedroom with a king size bed and a lovely bathroom. Surveying the fully equipped kitchen approvingly, Colette exclaimed, "I'm the grand chef and will cook all the meals." "Only morning coffee for a couple of days," I replied. "No work. We are here to play, sun, drink, dance, and lest you forget to love." We both wore great big smiles. Soon we had showered and were in bed. At about 9 that evening, we got up and went out on the town, having a great dinner, complete with Spanish wine, fruit, and coffee. Then on to a dance where we ate and drank until nearly 4 in the morning, back to the apartment and in bed again. And for the first time I ever heard Colette say, "I'm tired tonight." In the late morning, while she slept, I shopped for croissants, coffee, and fruit. The perfect continental breakfast. I wouldn't buy meat or fish until at least the third day. My lady needed a vacation from the kitchen, as from Paris. When Colette awoke, I brought her breakfast on a tray with fresh, squeezed orange juice, coffee, and a croissant. She smiled and said, "James, I'll have a kiss first." "Would Madame prefer a crash kiss or a soft kiss?" I teased. Who the fuck is James? Isn't his name Walter? "Would Madame prefer a crash kiss or a soft kiss?" I teased. Maybe she means James Bond. We were like honeymooners. I had never felt so much in love with anyone in my life. Our days were filled with hours in bed, in the sun, and in the blissful company of one another. I reflected that this was the first time in nearly 5 years that I had completely relaxed, and indeed it was almost too good to be true. So involved in my work had Colette become that she brought me back to the reality of my life's purpose. My goals had become hers. Oh my God, you're back. She too saw the winsome waifs wherever she looked. We were having lunch at a little sidewalk cafe in the quaint village of Marbella. Suddenly, Colette jumped up and ran across the street toward a lady and two Spanish children. In 5 minutes, back came Colette with the two children, ages 8 and 10, and their mother. Colette, who knew some Spanish, said that she had hired them. They were to be at the apartment the following day at 10 in the morning. They could sit twice a day, 10 sittings total. The cost would be $20, and the mother wanted dollars, not pesetas. "Am I a good detective, Walter?" Colette asked. "You are wonderful, Colette." I ordered some ice cream for the children and coffee for the mother. The next day, on schedule, the mother waited in the kitchen of our apartment while the children sat for my painting. To allow us the time we needed, Colette retired quietly to the balcony to sunbathe. After the third day of this, I said to her, "This is going to consume our time in Marbella. Would it be asking too much for you to telephone your mother and Renee to see if we might stay a few days longer?" Pardon? She put the call through immediately. It was the first time I had ever talked to Colette's mother. "She sounds like a charming lady," I said. "Yes, that's my mother. She's a charming lady. We're all set for another week when this painting will be finished. Then we can just play and lie in the sun." One evening about 7, we returned from a day of sailing. Walking along the dock, we found a little waif begging for money for her mother, who was ill. I said, "Colette, please wait. My next canvas is here." There was not one word from Colette. She went home with the little girl and found that her mother was indeed ill. I called a nearby doctor and he prescribed some medicine. Colette quickly had the prescription filled and brought food and milk for the little girl. She explained to the ill woman that I was an artist and wanted to paint her little girl, and that we would give her money for posing. Back and forth I went for days with brush and canvas. We made another call to Colette's mother, explaining that we would be 3 more days in Marbella. In fact, we spent nearly a month in Spain before returning to France. Rested and renewed, we arrived in Paris to find that Renee had been well cared for by her grandmother. She had enjoyed herself, but was understandably overjoyed to see Colette and me. Once again, we settled down to our hectic painter's life, interspersed with delightful, quiet moments of family intimacy. As with other important decisions in my life, however, I had a premonition that I was coming to a turning point before I actually did. After months with my waifs, I walked into my art class at the École, or is it École des Beaux Arts, inquiring of my absence. Old friends came to greet me. I met students, 2 boys for every girl. It never changed. Silence, the instructor was speaking. Soon a nude model appeared directly in front of me, face to face. I learned later that the instructor scheduled the model's appearance that way. I moved my easel back 3 feet away from the smell of her liquored breath and staring at those breasts which were aimed directly at me. My mind drifted, and a sudden vision of my future appeared. The creation of my master work was imprinted deeply in my consciousness. My mission was to search the world for the lost children from China, Japan, India, Africa, the Americas, Russia, the Spanish and Mediterranean countries. I would roam the world, knowing years would pass in the planning, the execution of hundreds of drawings and painting along the way to immortalize the children of the world on one enormous canvas would be years in the painting. Much like Michelangelo's, yeah, let's not go that far. Let's look at this. That's your masterpiece. That's not Michelangelo. Much like Michelangelo's painting, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I mean, come on, dude. Stop, just stop. When completed, my masterwork would one day hang at the summit meeting of world powers so that the world leaders making monumental. Why doesn't he have these margins justified? Looks raggedy. Decisions on peace or war would be reminded for whom they are negotiating. My life's work would be for a cause, our children, and my masterwork, tomorrow forever, the forever flow of the children of the world. Tapping the back of my head, a friend said, "Those boobs are real, Walter. Come back to the party." The model was an unattractive, tall, dissipated brunette, I'm guessing it's her, with a receding chin, a scar under her left eye, bulging hips, muscular legs, half asleep eyes, focused toward the floor, left arm supporting her hungover head. I stood directly in front of her for many days, hunched over my easel, finally stepping back, viewing nude Anne Terrier, a younger artist who sets himself to the task. It's such an important phrase. He doubled it. To the task can acquire experience faster, perhaps, in Paris than in any other city. And I was a determined young artist. The instructor came by as I put the last brush strokes to the painting, to this painting. He glanced at the canvas, then at me, nodding gravely, and said, "Eh bien, you have made the discovery." "Discovery?" I asked. He remarked, "There is more to a nude than a spine." And he walked on. The painting of nudes, the wild frivolity of Paris, with drinking parties and sex at the nod of one's head, were a sharp departure from my committed dedication to the lost children. Jesus Christ. Yes, yet they were a part of the artistic ambiance, of which one must partake if he is to learn the tools of the trade. Somehow I had to come to terms with myself to combine both worlds. Art is a stranger to all of us. Yeah, he had to partake. He could never have become the great artist that he was. My quandary at this time is revealed in the inevitable expression of one's search for identity. A self portrait, and I too succumbed in painting the American art student in Montmartre, complete with beret and old sweatshirt, pardon, an undiscovered Gauguin in the artist as a young man. In the same year, 1947, I also painted Child of Montmartre. Is it Montmartre? Montmartre. Well, I guess Sartre is Sartre, so Montmartre. I'll just say Montmartre. 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 I preferred it when I just did the the dolphin sound. A shy little mademoiselle romping the rues of Montmartre during my student days in Paris became a frequent model of mine. Although there were many artists in the area, she worked exclusively for me. She loved being captured on canvas and expressed her childish wonder each time she was painted. It was a joy to work with her, just as it had been to have Renee and the other children pose for me. In the depths of my being, I realized that the sad eyes of a homeless waif gave me more pleasure and hope than the upright derriere or the protruding breasts of a nude model. I knew that my stay in Paris was at an end. How could I tell Colette and explain to Renee that I must continue my search for the lost children in other countries? I needed to go to many foreign lands, places that would be difficult for Colette, impossible for Renee. I knew that I must search the world for the lost children, to show them in all their vulnerability and anguish as a reminder to the world leaders who were so dispassionately debating the feasibility of war. These children could not speak for themselves. It was I who must be their advocate, who must speak for them through my brush and canvas. This guy's a great, great person. There he is, self portrait. That's not a bad painting. This, on the other hand, Child de Montmartre. That's when the alien shit started. Can't abide by that. I don't care. I do want to find some of his, his wife's paintings because they weren't actually his. Is it possible to take another on a personal quest? I felt that it was not. I had prepared 10 envelopes with enough money in each to cover all Colette's living costs for 10 months. This way you can stay at home with Renee, I explained. Please don't go back to the streets. Walter, take us with you, she pleaded. Don't go without us. I love you. Renee loves you. Please stay with us forever. Is there anything I can do to change your mind? Unable to find words to describe my feelings, I held her soft, warm body close to mine, wishing to crush her to me forever. I knew this night of love might be our last, for God knows how long, and I wanted to savor every moment. Touching her lips with my fingers, then her eyes, while feeling the caress of her hands gliding gently over my body, I sensed every nerve within me tingling, crying out for her, enraptured by my gentle affection for this genuine, unselfish woman. I lifted her in my arms and carried her to our bed. What a romantic man. Chapter 6. He must be going back home to his wife. The water in San Francisco Bay. The great exodus from Paris came in August. Goodbye to Paris. Hello, Riviera. The sun, rocky beaches, and the sea. It was 1947. A sense of guilt coupled with the need for my wife and perhaps for a child of our own propelled me back to California and to Barbara. Although we had corresponded regularly while I was in Europe, our letters had often dealt exclusively with each other, with each of our very independent careers. Barbara was hard at work on her doctoral dissertation, a giant undertaking. My involvement in the art world of Paris and my newly found purpose of painting the lost children had become totally consuming. The correspondence between Barbara and me contained few words of natural intimacy between a loving husband and wife separated for a long time. Of course, my feelings for Colette and Renee had given new meaning to the word love. I wondered if and how a reunion with Barbara would materialize. Landing at the San Francisco airport, I was met by my real estate agent and friend Eric. As we crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, I asked Eric why we were not on the Bay Bridge heading for Berkeley. Eric replied, "Walter, Sausalito first, then I'll drive you to Berkeley." A right turn down the hill into Sausalito past the Glad Hand restaurant, the Four Winds Bar, and the No Name Bar north of the village, 1 mile, and to the right past Barda's huge ferry boat, and we pulled up to a barge. "It's beautiful," I said. "Your new home and art studio. Come inside. A fireplace, a large studio area, a lounge, a great kitchen, and a wild bathroom. Wait until you see the bedroom with a larger than king-size bed." "I'll take it," I told him, adding, "There's a 9-hour time difference between Paris and San Francisco." I'm bushed. "Will you run me over to Berkeley now?" Eric replied, "Just one stop on the way. The guys are expecting you at the No Name Bar to welcome you home." "Okay, for 1 hour, then Berkeley." The wild, talented painters were all there, and there were many toasts. I must have said at least 20 times, "Glad to be back." One artist asked if I had any photos of the paintings I'd done in Europe, so I showed some of my waifs. In about 20 minutes, he came back to say, "Wait, you'll be on the bread line yourself soon. These paintings are shit. Who in the hell would want one of these dirty, ragged kids hanging in their home? They're sick." I retorted that my friend just who was buying the wine bottles and roses you paint. "See you in a few days." I could see no reason to stay any longer. As the car wound up the driveway at my Berkeley home, Sylvia, our housekeeper, saw me from the kitchen window, running and waving her arms, shouting, "Mr. Keane, you're home." She helped unload the car and took my things in. All I wanted was a hot tub and a warm bed. The next thing I knew, it was morning. Barbara and I were having breakfast, and I asked her to meet me for lunch. Her response was that she already had plans. "That is the story of our life," I replied. "There it is." The geographic distance between us had aggravated our emotional detachment. I felt rejected and lonely for the warmth of Colette and Renee. Several days later, I informed Barbara that I had acquired a barge in Sausalito. It was to be my home and studio away from home. I emphasized the need for quiet and concentration if I were to pursue my new purpose and direction of painting the lost children. She voiced no objections to my new living and working arrangement. As always, Barbara, too, was caught up in her own activities and career obligations. I promised to install a telephone on the barge so that we might communicate regularly. Why don't you just get divorced, dude? Sausalito is a picturesque artist's village north of San Francisco. Tucked between the hills and the shore of San Francisco Bay, it has always hosted its share of talented, often somewhat eccentric individuals who seek the solitude and inspiration of the quiet hamlet. My nearest neighbor was Varda, an artist who lived a most colorful life on his huge ferry boat with his sailboat tied up nearby. His studio was usually filled with beautiful models eating his well-seasoned fish soup and watching him make collages with fabric scraps, which he managed to do between painting and making love with his models. Guys are talented, motherfuckers. Some months after moving abroad the barge, I was working in my studio when I heard rapping on my door. I opened it to find a lovely woman standing there. She was clad in a brief bikini and one with one sandal on her left foot and the other in her right hand. Are you deaf? I had been knocking for 5 minutes, then I took the heel of my shoe and banged. Sorry if I marked up the door. My name is Eileen. Varda sent me. We are going sailing, and he needs another man for the crew. I hesitated. Since living and working on the barge, I had been a virtual recluse. Barbara and I saw each other several times a month, but I had almost no communication with anyone else. It would have been easy to become involved with the party group, who frequented the bars and one another's studios. I knew, however, that the wildlife can be counterproductive and that it could lead to humiliation for my wife, only 20 miles away. Grandmother had always said, never embarrass your family. I had made every effort not to. Faced now with the prospect of beautiful female company and an afternoon of sailing, I succumbed to temptation. At your service, my beautiful lady, I said as I reached for a bottle opener to open a bottle of wine. Please, Eileen, you pour while I gather up my gear. You will find the glasses in the cupboard. Use the long stem, gold rimmed ones. She walked toward me and handed me a glass of wine, saying, let me make a toast to us. To us, someday when I am no longer working for Varda. He is doing a series of nudes using four of us girls. So until then, while walking back to Varda's boat, Eileen said, you're tall and slender and your eyes are blue like the sea. I like that. A girlfriend is visiting from Albany, New York. She's beautiful, tall, blonde hair, green eyes, and has a shapely body. Hilda asked me to find her a rich, handsome, tall, and sexy man like you. I replied, the only friend I have that fits that description is happily married. Hilda was striking. Her measurements were 38, 24, 36. Big boobs. However, in no way did she look cheap or easy. She shook my hand, a cigarette dangling from her lips. We set sail. 4 gorgeous girls and 2 artist sailors. Hilda was noticeably beautiful, but every time I looked her way, she would be lighting another cigarette. I'd never smoked. A disgustingly clean man. I am probably the only man alive who washes his hands before unzipping his pants and then washes them again after zipping up. Hilda, in her scant black bikini with her lovely flawless back, small rounded hips, and long sensuous legs, was standing on the starboard side of the sailboat, watching the pelicans out toward the sea. Another cigarette in her mouth. I walked up behind her and said, Hilda, your back is so kissable. My lips softly brushed kisses on her shoulder and down her back. She turned around. We embraced each other with a passionate, open-mouthed kiss. I pushed her away. And exclaimed, my God, your mouth tastes like a spittoon. Oh, no. Hilda cried out, you bastard, and gave me a hard shove. Man overboard, someone shouted. Damned cold, the water in San Francisco Bay. 3 life floats were thrown overboard to me. Drop the sails, Varda shouted. Get a raft, a rope, Eileen, some towels, a couple of blankets, and a bottle of whiskey. The small motor was soon in action. In minutes, I was in the lower cabin, shivering and cold. Eileen took charge, undressed me, put me to bed, and dried my body. First my front side, and then she turned me over and dried my back. Suddenly I could feel the warmth of Eileen's bikini-clad body across my back as I was still shivering from the cold water. The other 2 girls were rubbing my cold feet and calves. I said, let's do this every day. Eileen, lying across my back, whispered in my ear, your place tomorrow, Walter. You could have drowned out there. One time, looking out to sea, I couldn't see you anywhere. These waters are treacherous. You might have been injured in your fall. I was afraid you might be dead. Fatigue, I responded. The tragedy of life is not death. It is what we allow to die within us while we live. That's the tragedy of life. Hilda was with a cigarette in her mouth, came over near the bed and shouted, you should have let the bastard drown. Back on my barge, Eileen kept me in bed for 2 days. She said it was for fear I might become ill. Her work with Varda was near completion, and the other three models were there to occupy his time. Fortunately, Varda flipped over Hilda. Consequently, no problem arose with Eileen spending a few weeks with me. My days were spent painting from drawings I had done in Berlin and Paris. Eileen did a couple of modeling jobs in San Francisco. As she was a voracious reader and a marvelous cook, she was able to occupy her time while I was busy. We were well mated as lovers and enjoyed our busy, fun-filled days and nights together. I had not felt so fulfilled since my days in Paris with Colette. But Eileen was ambitious, and I recognized that she could have a great future as a model. Caught between desire to have her and the thought that her devotion to me was stifling her own career, I encouraged Eileen to take a 2 month modeling contract in Beverly Hills. At first, she protested, insisting that she would rather stay with me. Reach out for your career. Reach out for your career, baby girl. I responded, and several mornings later, I put her on a plane for Los Angeles. Returning to Sausalito and opening the door to the barge, I spied the rose I had intended to give Eileen. In the bathroom was an envelope taped on the mirror with a beautiful note enclosed. Dearest one, my Libra, my love. I believe Libras invented romance, refining it to an art with great finesse. My romantic excursion into your heart never got tangled up with a lot of clinging vines. You are a brilliant, talented man. I wanted to be your prisoner. I'll miss your thoughtfulness and tenderness. One of the many things between us that I like is our sexual activity, from frequency to variety. We can talk, telling the other what makes us happy. To me, that's really the advantage of being friends as well as lovers. Often, while lying quietly in each other's arms, we share warm and wonderful thoughts. Whatever, either of us wants in bed, or out of bed for that matter, the other extends himself to please. Walter, I wouldn't have left without your permission. A part of me will always love you and the beautiful times we shared together. Letting me go, I felt you didn't want our love to rope you in. Eileen. Oh my god, this book is putrid, but there we go. 70 pages. About 7 pages. And then I'll wrap this shit up. Where am I at? 33 minutes already. 33 when I said it. That's fucking Freemasons. Chapter 7, Susan. The short period with Eileen had reawakened my need for companionship and family. In the middle of December, I moved back to Berkeley, where Barbara was busy preparing for semester exams at the university. I soon became spoiled with the warmth and comfort of our home. I enjoyed having Sylvia serve me breakfast in bed whenever I liked. Her evening meals were reminiscent of New Orleans's Antoine's French restaurant on Rue Saint Louis. Sylvia came from New Orleans, spoke some French, and said that when she was young she worked in the kitchen of Antoine's, where one of the chefs had taught her to prepare many French dishes. It was not difficult to believe her. I was spending most of my waking hours painting. One evening, Barbara came into my studio and announced that she had taken her last exam and had some free time before the spring term began. Great, I exclaimed. I'll wash up. Soon we were on our second bottle of Montrachet wine, spending a quiet evening by the fire, both singing while Barbara played the cello. As though we were searching the other's thoughts through our eyes, I whispered, "It's time we have another baby." Wait, did it already have a baby? Am I making that up? Or is he making that up? Tears came to my eyes as I remembered our son, who, unlike the children I painted, had not been a survivor. It had been only 4 years ago, in the spring of 1944, that a beautiful dream had ended in a nightmare when our first child, a boy, died at birth. We had both quietly carried this tragedy until now. I knew that my preoccupation with the lost waifs had focused my attention more than ever on childhood. In Paris, Renee had become my little girl, if only for a few months. Now both Barbara and I recognized our need for a child of our own. Perhaps we also knew that a son or daughter might be the tie between us that would finally make us a family unit. Feeling duly inspired and at peace with myself, I began 1948 with dedication to my portrayal of the lost children. Working from drawings done in Paris and Berlin, I began to paint in the texture of what Wordsworth called passionate moments recollected in tranquility. The artifact of this momentum I called the waif. And there it is. I mean, some critics have labeled this painting the first perfect Keane because of the juxtaposition of symbols which became characteristic of my work. Specifically, in this painting, the symbols are the waif, her eyes, the stairs, the cat, and the cenophosic vista, which delineate on one plane a powerful system of verticals and horizontal. On a second plane, we see a series of slashing diagonals which set in motion an intervibration of architectural solids and spatial media whose fury is alternately frozen and released in the moment of viewing by the simple, unyielding repetition of perpendicular blacks in the girl's muslin stockings and the perpendicular legs and tail of the cat. Where the hell's the cat? Oh, there he is. Completing the fugal harmonies of the girl and the cat, who are separated by the symbolic but clinical distance of the stairs and the repetition of the eyes. When I finished this painting, I felt that I had finally defined, I felt that I had finally defined to myself and to others the effect and emotion that I had been trying to convey since Berlin. I mean, do you really feel much about this? It feels like a fucking cartoon. During the course of work on the waif, Barbara and I learned that she was again pregnant. I remember so vividly how and where she announced the news to me. I was returning from a trip to New York and was to meet Barbara in Pebble Beach for a short holiday together. Upon my arrival, she was all smiles and hugs with her arms wrapped around me. Hand in hand, we started walking. Soon the sea was in view. We sat on the grass under the trees, and I removed Barbara's coat so she could lie upon it. We stayed there until the sun set and the first star appeared. We talked and kissed. Our voices spoke in unison. I'm so happy. The days that followed were filled with joy. I continued to paint with greater joy and enthusiasm than ever before. As I created the waif on canvas, Barbara nurtured a child of our own within her, whether by design or coincidence. The little girl of my paintbrush grew simultaneously with the real baby of our dreams. Susan Hale Keane was born on December 20th, 1948 at Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley. Mother and daughter were in perfect health, and father was beside himself with pride and happiness. While Barbara slept, I left the hospital and returned with a case of fine French champagne and 6 long-stemmed glasses. Dr. Haddon and an attending nurse were in the room with Barbara. I popped the cork, and as a trio, we toasted Barbara as she slept. Little Susan was brought into the room, and pictures were taken of the sleeping mother with her now baby. I was so inspired that I began to expand my creative efforts in other areas. I designed toys and puppets for a toy factory that I had established. Barbara and I wrote a script for 2 of the puppets, a French girl and an American boy. Recordings were made of the script. Madeleine Mayo, wife of the French composer Dorius? I thought it said Doritos at first. Mayo spoke the part of the little girl. In the story, the little American boy flew on the back of an eagle and to Paris, where he met the little French girl. As the two flew back to America, the little girl taught the American boy to speak French. The puppets and records were sold together in a colorful box at FAO Schwartz in New York, and the fuck does that mean? And I Magnin. Okay, I see. I Magnin in San Francisco. I had long known that it takes many forms of expression to satisfy all aspects of the inner self. Before and shortly after Susan's birth, I sensed an overwhelming desire to create through as many different mediums as possible. The urge to paint, to write, to sing, to dance, to cook became overwhelming at times. I remembered that Michelangelo had expressed himself in a multitude of creative ways. He regarded architecture more his art than painting and sculpture. His great murals were done during a short time period, 1542 to 1550, of his productive life. Not all of us can be a Michelangelo with such diversified talents. I knew that through my grandmother's love and encouragement, I had been able to nurture and to develop my fair share of creativity. I also realized that I possessed other important characteristics necessary for success in the world of the arts. I was willing to take risks with my work, to remain alone for long periods of time, and to isolate myself from the trends and fads so prevalent in music, literature, and art. Most important, I felt an intense need to create something distinctly mine. It might be copied, but the original keenness would always be recognized among the imitations. Still searching for a sense of fulfillment in my artistic endeavors, I painted Perplexity. In it, we see the pianist, who is myself, seated at the piano, with the keys running off into the horizon, ending with the ceiling opening to an unclear, murky sky. The indecision in my life is reflected in my posture, with the far off gaze seeking something to fill the great abyss called life. In March of 1950, when Susan was 16 months old, I decided that Barbara and I should have an extended vacation together. We had relished our role as parents, but as in the past, before Susan was born, we had little time to ourselves. Barbara's mother had offered to care for Susan if she ever took a trip. She was delighted to oblige now, so that Barbara and I might spend a long second honeymoon in France. I have a feeling they're going to meet up with Colette. We arrived in Paris in early July. After several weeks of the exciting nightlife, we settled down in an apartment. Barbara worked as a designer for a couturier, couturier. I don't know how to say it. I'll just say a couturier. I painted at my Montmartre studio and at the Place du Tertre. I also attended Le Cordon Bleu, the famous cooking school. Pursuit of another interest made me a frequent spectator at the ballet. I then enrolled in This guy goes on vacation and enrolls in fucking classes. I, I then enrolled in ballet classes to understand better the models from my painting of ballerinas. In Paris, Barbara was a warm, passionate woman. Without her university schedules and pressures, she relaxed. We enjoyed many tender, loving moments together. The weeks flew by, and before we knew it, autumn had arrived. I encouraged Barbara to stay in France with me, suggesting that her mother bring Susan to us on an ocean liner. How convenient. She agreed excitedly. The story of Susan's trip with her grandma is one of our finest family anecdotes. Had Barbara and I known what was transpiring in New York at the dock, and during the initial hours of the voyage, we surely would have died from panic. At the check in desk on the dock, a porter took the luggage to the cabin while Grandma put Susan down to show passports, tickets, and vaccination certificates to the clerk. This occupied 3 or 4 minutes of Grandma's undivided attention. When these formalities were completed, she reached down to take Susan's hands. No, Susan. A scene that had been orderly turned into mayhem. The search was on. After dock personnel, boat employees, passengers, and their friends searched unsuccessfully, the captain was notified. He in turn called the New York police. Everyone available was searching for a 22-month-old child in a pink dress and a pink sweater with long blonde hair and blue eyes. The police fanned out over a quarter-mile area, and every 15 minutes the captain had her description announced on the boat. 3 minutes before departure, Grandmother received word from the captain that she must decide to stay or sail. With great anguish, she said, "I'll sail." What? In her cabin, Grandma was given a sedative, the sedative by the boat's doctor and a nurse arrived to sit with her. 2 hours had passed since Susan was lost. Meanwhile, parties were going on at every level of the ships. Everyone was having a wonderful time, except the dear, sweet, wonderful, and very concerned grandmother. On the first class deck, a large wedding party was adjourning. The bride and groom announced that they were returning to their stateroom, but would see their friends again at dinner. The newlyweds arrived at their cabin quite exhausted. The bride told her husband that she would meet him in bed after showering. Upon opening the door to her bedroom, she discovered a little blonde-haired girl in a pink dress, fast asleep on the bed. The bride exclaimed, "This is the child they have been looking for hours." She called the captain. Within moments, Grandma and nurse arrived at the stateroom. As the sobbing woman sat stroking the sleeping child's beautiful hair, Susan awoke and, with a sweet smile, said, "Hi, Grandma." The relief felt by Grandma at this moment was a double joy. For those hours of torment while she waited and hoped for Susan to be found, she thought, "How will I ever tell Barbara and Walter that I have lost their child? They who have already suffered the dreadful fate of losing their firstborn." In Paris, we met the travelers at the Gare du Nord. As we traveled through town in the taxis, Barbara asked her mother if she and Susan had a comfortable crossing. It was an adventure. I'll tell you about it in a day or so. She was too shaken to speak of the event at that time and didn't want to mar our meeting with such a tale. Once settled in our apartment, Susan spent much of her time with me at the Plaza de Tetra? Tertra? Tertra. At Montmartre, where I often painted. We frequently took lunch at the outside table at La Kathleen restaurant. They knew me there and would keep an eye on Susan, who was becoming rather continental. She had developed a taste for escargot with a small glass of white wine, which was common for the French. I always wore a Danish beret with a red tassel on top, making it easy for Susan to find me should one of us stray off. The artists around Montmartre got to know Susan and often gave her instruction at her lunch table. The little lady of the world would order them a glass of wine or coffee, putting it on Daddy's bill, free art lessons for a coffee. Barbara and her mother made several trips alone, leaving Susan with me in my Montmartre studio. In one little corner, I'd set up an easel for her, along with a paint stand and with all the brushes and tubes of paint she would need. After a few weeks, I could see her creativity blossoming from her brush, such as mine had with my grandmother's encouragement. Susan and I both have many fond memories of that time. A father and his daughter exploring the world together, learning from each other and from our experiences together, growing as people and as artists, and as artists. She was my inspiration many times, and I her teacher, which later led to her expressions on canvas. Susan Keane once wrote, "My first toys were brushes, and there were always plenty of paint. I loved clowns, and they were the subject of many of my paintings. I used to do a round face like a ball with round eyes. This was when I remember my first instructions in anatomy. Dad showed me how the eyeball was round, but the eyelid fit around it in a way that you never saw the entire iris. Dad was always searching for lost children to paint. He felt an artist needed an instinctive style so that anyone seeing his work would know it was his. This became very true of his style and is becoming so with mine. He paints big sad eyes. My paintings make bold, memorable statements. Our utopia ended when Barbara and her mother came back. I hope it's been Barbara the whole time and not Barbara. It was Barbara, right? There's no way I misread that all those times. And her mother came back from a trip to announce that they were returning to California in 2 days. Stunned and nearly speechless, I asked, "Can Susan stay with me? Can't you come for her next summer when you are out of school?" Two voices speaking at once said, "No." Once again, I was torn, longing to preserve our family unit, but unable to forsake the goals that I had chosen for myself. Our last night in Paris together was strained and sometimes argumentative. Barbara and I talked until the sun arose. She was going home to her world, something safe, secure, and known, near her family, friends, work, and the university. I, on the other hand, was left to explore the world in search of my lost children. Our needs were different, and our visions for the future were worlds apart. I mean, it's not like someone forced you to stay, Bubba. As I set out on my personal search, I realized that I had chosen, with great sadness and a feeling of aloneness, to become the waif of my youth, the waif with whom I had so completely identified that I was about to give up my child and wife. I knew that our marriage existed now merely as a formality. There was a dignity to our relationship. Barbara and I had a great respect for each other and tended to let many things go unspoken. I felt as though in the artist's world, laws and rules of matrimony didn't seem to exist. The next morning, alone, waving to my family at Orly Airport as the plane was airborne, I wondered if I would ever see them again. The last thing I said to my little Susie as she was leaving was a whisper: "Don't overdo the growing up." Knowing a decision had to be made about our future, I looked back on the discussion that Barbara and I had before her departure. In retrospect, I can see how confused I was, how pitifully ignorant of the true meaning of commitment to both my life and my art. Had I really understood, my life could never have taken the course it did. This guy is fucking insane. Absolutely insane, bro. Alright, that's all. 54 minutes.